Hey, I'm Anna Arndt. I'm from Lima, Montana, and I teach elementary language arts, 5th and 6th grade, and I also teach special ed. Right now I'm not in Lima, Montana. I'm in Oregon, so it's very green. You can see my dog in the background somewhere. So, anyway, um, but my talk today is on the incarceration of youth. Obviously, I live in Montana, so my focus was on Montana. And it was what I found was very interesting, and I didn't realize it dealt quite so much with restitution. So I'll get into that. But all right, so in just a general breakdown of who is getting arrested and why, and I just took crimes against property, and I Googled that and queried that. There's a very good database I can get all the stats off of. So there was 2,183 crimes against property committed by youth in Montana in 2013, I believe, or 14. And so the breakdown of that was roughly 64% of those offenders were male, and about 33% were female. I broke the female part down. About 66% of those were Caucasians, so non-Hispanic like Caucasians. And about 16% were Native American or Native Alaskan. 2%, roughly about 2% were Hispanic, and another 2% were African American. And that's just the girls, the breakdown of the girls there. So they commit crimes. What happens? They're incarcerated in detention centers, and I did speak with one of those detention centers, and he explained a little bit of the process to me. But they are arrested and held at a detention center, and sometimes actually detention centers are also used as like safety houses for when youth are going through a traumatic situation with their family. Like the detention center I spoke to has a specific shelter for that, and kids can stay there and be protected and be secure. So anyway, but if kids are detained and held, imprisoned, incarcerated against their will or with their will, whatever, but they are incarcerated, they're held there and in a youth facility, and they have to be separated from adult offenders by sight and sound. And that is dictated by the funding that we get from the federal government, which states that a state must keep youth separated by sight and sound from adult offenders. Okay, so moving on from that, they will either get let out on bail or they'll stay. So then they go to trial, and if they are convicted, then obviously a judgment is passed. So often they are put on probation, or they could be put in prison. So the two options for prisons actually are either Pine Hills for males or Riverside for females. The size also correlates kind of with the population demands. The Pine Hills is a little bit larger facility than Riverside. All right, interestingly enough, Pine Hills definitely focuses on restoration. Like I said, they pay about $32,000 a year in restoration. The males who are incarcerated there work to pay off some of their debt. There was a pilot program also at Pine Hills that, interestingly enough, since we've been learning about it, a pilot program to teach mindfulness and like interpersonal relationship building, basically. They also strongly encourage communication with victims, so they'll write like a letter to the victim, and which will be kept on file actually. So just obviously to restore somewhat of try to make restitution somehow, with asking forgiveness for what they've done. So that that was interesting. I hadn't realized that, the emphasis on that. The trend definitely has been moving to lower incarceration of youth, and interestingly enough, they have found out that incarcerating youth does not necessarily help. Okay, so the numbers behind that are this, and this is just one study that's indicative of it. So Ohio did a study that said, okay, we'll look at institutions that simply incarcerate, and then we'll look at alternative programs. You know, the group style, small group, relationship, routine, establishing group type homes that teach values, and they usually emphasize family quite a bit. So I looked at that study, and the rate for rearrest after being released was 35% for just a correctional facility, and it was a mere 10% for the group style alternative settings to place youth in. So obviously that's a rather large difference in a percentage difference. These kids are definitely benefited by a non-traditional prison experience, I guess you could say. Where they are taught, they're taught a routine, they're taught to be responsible, they're taught to make restitution, they learn about forgiveness and self-regulation and mindfulness. Has a huge effect on whether they're rearrested or not. Very interesting, and it's interesting to me that Pine Hills has worked so hard to pilot that program and get that started at their prison. Definitely aimed toward changing the mindset in Montana, and I'm sure elsewhere too. But obviously, I studied Montana, so definitely interesting. I have never had a student who has been incarcerated, but I'm assuming that I will someday. And obviously, students who have been incarcerated have experienced trauma that they've created and trauma that other people have created for them. So we need to continue with the mindfulness instruction and just teaching how to self-regulate and how to manage emotion and how to remain centered and how to calm yourself down and how to get along with people well and to experience success in all of those areas in order to keep them on the right track, in order to keep them from going back to those behaviors that got them arrested in the first place. That's just a little bit I found out about incarceration in Montana, youth incarceration. I guess to cap it all off, the numbers are going down, and the money is definitely being directed, and the effort is being directed towards changing mindset. So facilities are in place to do that. Places like the Yellowstone Boys and Girls Ranch, and then various group homes. There's about 30. I just counted off the table of contents in the corrections department pamphlet. So they're out there. People who care deeply for these kids are working very hard to get their mindsets to change, to help them to become really productive citizens. So you guys have a wonderful evening or afternoon or whatever this is for you, and wonderful 4th of July weekend.